Living Hope from Zambia is really unusual because it is an orphanage that started a coffee farm to make itself more sustainable. Typically, when you meet producers in the world, they've been in business, their grandfather was in the same business, their great-great-great-grandfather was growing coffee. Here you had a bunch of people who had no idea, but they knew that coffee could grow there.
So we've been working with Living Hope since 2019, but when we visited last year, we got really close to Juana Chapoya. And Juana Chapoya was going to university for agronomy full-time. On the weekends and at nights, if that's possible, he's been in command of the farm. For several years, the yield had been going down, and that's just generally not the way it's supposed to go. We asked leadership for a plan, and really that's what we were coming to check up on in 2023. What's the progress that was made? So last time we went, there was a building being worked on that was for the workers, who before then had to eat outside and go to the restroom someplace else and so on and so forth. So now there's a new kitchen, there's an eating space, there are showers for the end of a hard day's work, restrooms, changing rooms, but also there's a coffee lab in that building. And so from that sort of hard asset perspective, there's a real leap forward. They've broke ground on their new washing station, and I would say that they are 3/4 of the way through that.
Currently, what they're using is really pretty antiquated and too small for their production.
This is where you take a cherry and take the seed out. As yields improve, they're going to need a more sophisticated washing station.
They've also taken great leaps forward in their composting process. That's something that Juana's science brain has been really interested in pursuing. They didn't used to compost at all, and then they went to just sort of straight letting things kind of rot naturally, and then they've added this new layer of using worms, and Juana has plans to expand that.
And Juana has created, it's called a compost tea, and it's just a more accelerated method of composting where you take green and brown matter and put it in a mesh bag, immerse that in water, and all that leaches out to the water. But when you apply it to the plants in the field, there's a much faster uptake on that, especially with the war in Ukraine as fertilizer costs keep going up.
The compost provides some natural fertilizer for the coffee plants, but it also provides fertilizer for the kitchen garden that they've attached to the side of the coffee farm. They're growing all kinds of things from beans and cabbages to native greens. And that kitchen garden helps keep the children at Living Hope fed.
We've been having a conversation about shade trees for some time. This is the first time that we've come and see those show up and be in place. A coffee tree, especially the Arabica variety, is really an understory tree. It requires some cover over it because you want the cherries to develop relatively slowly. But the other reason to do it is just from a climate change perspective. When you put shade trees up, it just lowers the temperature of the farm altogether. It prevents evaporation and aspiration of moisture into the air. And so having the shade just produces a better product, but it's more ecologically sound.
Juana picked a particular variety that, in addition to providing shade to the coffee plants, it drops its leaves when the coffee plants need full sun. And when it drops its leaves, it helps fix the nitrogen in the soils. It is its own form of fertilizer.
Another really important part of the agronomy that's going on is some regeneration. That's where you take out old plants and you put in new ones. And in this case, it was almost a necessity. There was an infestation of white borer, and it's just really hard to treat. And if you treat it, you got to do it with chemicals, and then you're not doing it in a sustainable manner and so on and so forth. So it's just better to pull out the old bushes, treat the soil a little bit with organic material, and then plant anew. We saw a lot of new regeneration going on.
When we initially got into this relationship with Living Hope, we were really thinking a lot about the orphans. But what we've really come to understand is how important Living Hope is as a way of driving improvements in the region.
So in 2022, we had to decide, well, who's going to be the face of Living Hope Coffee? Really, one of the most powerful moments of this year's visit is when we got all the workers together and we already had the prototype of the Living Hope bag and we did the reveal on that.
The whole point of our single origin releases is really to put a name and a face and a place on the coffee that we're buying through these partnerships. And nobody is more deserving of that name and that face and that place than Juana Chapoya.
And you know, the workers, it was palpable the pride that they had in this. We announced our cupping score at the same time too, which is an 82.5.
We got a great tour from Juana the day after he finished school. I mean, he's really not had a weekend off in 4 years. And we certainly didn't give him one when we landed, did we? And then the day after that, we put him on a plane with us to go to Kenya and Mozambique to be our OBIIS agronomist with us for the tour, part of our FarmShare program.
There we are the next day at the Zambian airport, ready to fly off to Kenya, and we have this motley crew with us. We brought Kim, our photographer, Nathan's with us, Rich from Paramount's with us, Heather's with us, and this young gentleman has to integrate with that group right away. But he just has a way of being with people that makes it easy. Arriving in Kenya, we all pile out of the car like a bunch of clowns, and we're like, hey, everybody's here, and here's our friend from Zambia. And the folks in Kenya were like, well, I thought you guys were bringing a coffee farmer. Well, we're like, no, this is Juana. He's a coffee farmer and an agronomist, and he's from Zambia. And they were like, we were expecting somebody so much older than him.
So usually when we land in a coffee field, whether we like it or not, what we find is that it's Bob, me, and the coffee farmer, and then a circle of people around us. But this time in Kenya, it was different. Started with Bob, me, and the coffee farmer, but Juana was over here having a conversation with some of the other small farmers that are friends of the coffee farmer we were there to visit. And within about 5 minutes, there was a circle around Juana. It was Bob and I over here, like all by ourselves, which was awesome, I have to say. That's what we were there for. It was really cool. Particularly, I think, for somebody who's in their 20s and just out of school. When you walk onto a coffee farm and there are people that have been doing it for 30 or 40 years, and they're asking for your advice, they may not really want your advice, but they're politely asking for your opinion on their processes. Finding a way, as the young person, to deliver that information in a way that doesn't shut people down, that doesn't have them kind of like cross their arms and roll their eyes, that takes real skill. I give him 1,000% credit for his grace under that kind of pressure. He was amazing.
Michelle and I have a lot of coffee knowledge. And Michelle's a master gardener, and I've been in the coffee industry since 1995. And there's not much wool you can pull over our eyes, so to speak. But what happens when you bring two farmers together? Even though you're farming in different parts of the world, you share the problems and the solutions with each other. And everybody feels like they come away learning that much more.
Also, it really does help guide our decision making about how an opportunity could or couldn't work. For us, it's the people first, and because we're dealing with producers that also are about people first, they have an intuition about what's happening, not just on the coffee farm, but with the coffee workers and with the pickers and how that's all working.
You know, I'm not really sure whether he was giving the farmers energy or the farmers were giving him energy, but the energy that we had throughout the day just seemed to be infinite.
Coffee farming can be so isolating. And then all of a sudden, out of like, might as well be from outer space, comes this OBIIS team with another producer. There's so many things that go into growing coffee that are really specific and only about growing coffee. And being able to share that with somebody else from a faraway place is really, really powerful. A lot of trust comes really quickly when you spend hours on end in the back of some vehicle.
By the time we get to the end of the day, we do a debrief. And, you know, frankly, we didn't know how would it go with Juana through the day. And of course, there were our observations of how well it went. But through the debrief, we could really just see that Juana's confidence was higher, And we were looking at only getting about 3.5 hours worth of sleep before we had to take off for Mozambique.
So the thing about getting to Mozambique is it takes a while. It takes 3 flights, and then it's a bush plane ride, about 45 minutes, to the Gorongosa base camp, where we met Sophia Molina, and then we climb into the back of one of those trucks, and we ride a steadily deteriorating set of roads as we get closer and closer to where we're staying. It was one thing to take Juana to Kenya, where coffee farming looks very different than it does in Zambia. But when we landed on the coffee fields in Mozambique and Juana took a look at what they were doing, he felt right at home. And the thing about that was so cool is Julius, who is their head technical guy, their head agronomist, he was outlining the problems they're facing. They have the same white borer that they have in Zambia. They have the same other kind of pest that's reduced their yield by half. And they're trying to start up composting, but they're facing these challenges. And Juana was in his element because he's faced all of these things and he has solutions that they had never even considered in Mozambique. And when we watched the conversation develop between Juana and Julius out in the fields, it was just this bubbling up, churning of excitement and energy.
I believe Sophia Molina went, this is mind-blowing. You know, one thing that we notice when we're out there, and this used to happen with us with Jorge as well, we're out there in the field with Juana and everybody wants to hire him.
The confidence boost that is for a young farmer just getting started out in his career as a farmer is enormous. It opens up his world too.
I mean, what happened with Juana is what happens when anybody gets in contact with one big island in space. You begin to realize that we're not talking about coffee, we're talking about people.
So one of the things Juana told us about that time that the leadership at Living Hope came to him and asked him to switch careers is one of the things that allowed that door to open for him was that he understood the higher purpose of helping make that orphanage sustainable, of coffee having a higher purpose. And therefore, as a coffee farmer, he has a higher purpose. And that, I think, has just gotten stronger for Juana as he's gone through his education and out into the world now as a fully formed agronomist. And coffee as this higher calling is something that I think Juana is really excited about. We know we're excited about it. Purpose is why we get up every morning. It's exciting to have Juana on the team.